recording the sirens of the southern sky. These days it takes a generation to build a giant telescope. A new one is taking shape in the Atacama Desert in Chile. Las Campanas Observatory, Chile. To walk among the observatory domes of the Atacama Desert is to brush your hair with the stars. The Atacama, on a plateau high in the Chilean Andes, is one of the driest and darkest places in the world. During the day one can see to Bolivia, far to the east, where clouds billow into thunderstorms that will never moisten this region. At night, calm, unruffled winds off the Pacific Ocean produce some of the most exquisite stargazing conditions on Earth. One evening in late January the sky was so thick with stars that the bones of the constellations blurred into the background. The Milky Way, our home galaxy, was rolling straight overhead, and the large and small Magellanic Clouds, satellite galaxies of our own, floated alongside like ghosts. The Southern Cross, that icon of adventure and romance, loomed unmistakably above the southern horizon. In the last half-century, astronomers from around the world have flocked to Chile and its silky skies, and now many of the largest telescopes on Earth have taken root along a sort of observatory alley that runs north-south for some 800 miles along the edge of the Atacama. The residents include the Very Large Telescope, composed of 4 telescopes, each more than 8 meters, 27 feet in diameter, and built by an international collaboration called the European Southern Observatory. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, another 8-meter telescope, is set to start operating next year, mapping the entire sky every 3 days. The ability of a telescope to harvest light from distant stars depends roughly on the area of its primary mirror. The Palomar Telescope in Southern California, an instrument that ruled astronomy into the 1990s, was 5 meters, or 200 inches, in diameter. Las Campanas Observatory, whose telescopes and offices are strung along a steep ridge on Cerro Las Campanas at an altitude of 8,500 feet, was one of the early adopters to the Atacama sky. Taking pride of place along the ridge today are 2 innovative telescopes, the Twin Magellans, each with curved sweeps of aluminized glass 6.5 meters in diameter, side by side in separate enclosures. But these are just a beginning. Las Campanas is an outpost of the Carnegie Observatories, based in Pasadena, California, which in turn is owned by the Carnegie Institution for Science, based in Washington. The Carnegie Institution is a founder of and a driving force behind a consortium of 13 universities and institutions that aims to build the Giant Magellan Telescope, or GMT, a multi-billion-dollar instrument more powerful than any existing ground-based telescope. When completed, the telescope will have 7 mirrors, each 8 meters in diameter, that together will act as a 22-meter diameter telescope, roughly 20 times as powerful as Palomar. The GMT will be built at the top of Cerro Las Campanas, 2 miles from the domes of the Carnegie's existing telescopes. Equally gargantuan telescopes are being planned and built on mountain tops elsewhere around the world. With these cathedrals of glass, steel and technology, astronomers hope to capture their first detailed images of faraway planets, the next important step in the quest to determine whether the cosmos beyond Earth is habitable, or perhaps even inhabited. Going south. The Carnegie Institution for Science was founded by Andrew Carnegie in 1902. It prides itself on its history in science and astronomy, said Eric D. Isaacs, a physicist and the institution's president. In 1929 the astronomer Edwin Hubble, using Carnegie telescopes on Mount Wilson, in Pasadena, discovered that the universe was expanding. In 1978 another Carnegie astronomer, Vera Rubin, confirmed that the stars and galaxies were swathed in clouds of a mysterious dark matter, which scientists still do not understand. The Carnegie began eyeing Chilean skies in the 1960s as a potential site for a southern twin to the 200-inch Hale telescope, which was completed on Palomar Mountain in 1948 in partnership with the California Institute of Technology. 20 years later, the Carnegie bought 84 square miles in the Atacama region for 30 cents an acre. The National Science Foundation was establishing an outpost farther south at Cerro Tololo, and the European Southern Observatory, a European organization, had stationed telescopes on La Silla, a peak visible from Las Campanas. Continue reading the main story. It was just a genius move, Dr. Isaacs said. This plot of land is wide open for ideas. The first telescope on Las Campanas, a 1-meter-wide reflector called the Swope telescope, went into action in 1969. It was named after Henrietta H. Swope, an American astronomer and philanthropist who is credited with figuring out a way to measure the distances of stars and nearby galaxies. In 1984, Bradford A. Smith of the University of Arizona and Richard J. Terrell of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the Swope telescope to discover a disk of dust around the star Beta Pictoris, evidence of planet formation in action. That was the beginning of exoplanets, said John Mulcahy, the director of Carnegie Observatories and its branch at Las Campanas. And in 1987, when a star in the Large Magellanic Cloud exploded as a supernova, it was first seen by the Swope and, simultaneously, with the naked eye of a Las Campanas staff member who was on a break in the parking lot. The lure of the Southern Cross. The accommodations along astronomy's Route 66 ranged from rustic to luxurious. Researchers at the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, at 15,900 feet, it's the world's highest radio telescope, must wear oxygen masks to visit. The very large telescope has a swimming pool. All of the observatories have a soccer pitch and compete among themselves in a tournament every year. Consensus holds that the best food in all of astronomy is to be found at the Chilean observatories. Getting to Las Campanas entails an overnight flight to Santiago, 10 hours from New York or Los Angeles. A 2-hour flight north to La Serena, a coastal resort town where some of the Chilean observatories, including Las Campanas, have offices. And then a 3-hour drive up into the mountains. Dr. Mulcahy lives in Pasadena, where Carnegie Observatories is based, but he commutes to Las Campanas regularly. His trip in January was his 134th since 1994, when he first came for postdoctoral research on the mass and fate of the universe. At one point, I estimated that I've spent something like 15% of my adult life at LCO, he said afterward in an email. During the coronavirus pandemic, many of the observations at Las Campanas were carried out remotely. Neither Dr. Mulcahy nor Dr. Isaacs had been to the observatories since before COVID, and they were eager to get back. What has changed is the people, Dr. Mulcahy said. Many of the staff members, who live down in La Serena, had retired, and too many astronomers had grown accustomed to observing from their living rooms, without the stress of the expensive and time-consuming trip to the telescope. As a result, the younger astronomers often didn't know the telescopes or the people operating them. It's important to get them back, Dr. Mulcahy said. Creatures of the night. Next to the domes on Las Campanas is a cluster of cabins for visitors, staff members and researchers, who stay for a week at a time, and a lodge with a dining hall, which has a cappuccino machine. Populating the ridge and surrounding slopes are herds of gazelle-like creatures called guanacos, vizcachas, marmot-like rodents with rabbit ears, burros, and hawks. The white domes of La Silla Observatory are visible to the south. Attached to the main lodge is a terrace where, at day's end, astronomers gather to try to get a glimpse of the green flash, a rare last vestige of the sun as it disappears below the horizon, if the conditions are exactly right. After sunset it's lights out at the lodge, and observatory personnel will come and pull down the blinds on your cabin windows if you haven't done so already, to keep artificial light off the mountain and out of sensitive telescope instruments. One night I walked over to the Swope telescope, beneath a Milky Way so bright that it was possible to navigate the narrow trail by its light alone. Through the telescope I beheld banded Jupiter holding court with 3 of its glittering moons, and 160,000 light-years away in the Large Magellanic Cloud, mists of interstellar gas twining through the Tarantula Nebula. The view at the top of Las Campanas the next morning was less immediately celestial. A cluster of construction trailers. A maze of rope barriers to keep visitors from falling off the mountain. Hawks circled a thin metal tower that held various instruments to monitor the weather and the atmosphere. Looking down, I teetered on the edge of a hole in the roof of the world. Concentric circular trenches, some as much as 60 feet deep, had been carved into the volcanic rock of the mountain top, bringing to mind a pre-Columbian earthwork. This was the future home of the giant Magellan telescope. I asked Dr. Mulcahy what it would do that the James Webb and Hubble space telescopes could or would not. A lot, he said. For one thing, the giant Magellan instruments were being prioritized for studying exoplanets and would be capable of detecting rocky, Earth-like planets as far as 30 light-years away. Moreover, as technology improves over time, astronomers will be able to change and upgrade the main instruments, whereas space-based telescopes are stuck with whatever technology they carried at launch. In a briefing down in one of the construction trailers, Oscar Contreras Villarreal, the vice president of the Giant Magellan organization and its legal representative to the Chilean G.